Hi guys, welcome to my little tutorial or let's build for the Munitorum Armoured container. This one is from the Games Workshop Conquest magazine, and I want to give you a quick run through how to build it, later how to paint it, and with a heavy focus of weathering. So what I'm doing here is I simply cut out all the pieces, I will file them down, and later glue them together. That's nothing really special. So I fast forward here and I will use the time to tell you that I will aim towards a very weathered, damaged, broken container on a snow base, because most of my terrain pieces are snow based. My ultramarines have a snow theme, and even my other miniatures have at least some kind of Hive City cold snow theme type. So it all should fit together, and therefore this will be my style. So what you should do is, especially if you weather a terrain piece and you want to put a little bit more effort in painting it, take care that you, as always, remove the mold lines. And for that purpose, as you can see here, I also use these kind of squishy grinding sponges, I would call them. They are very good because they will bend a little bit around the structures, and whatever you have prepared with your knife, or even if you want this official Games Workshop mold remover, which is just like a little scraping tool, and you can even use the back of your hobby cutting knife as well. It will just make the job a little bit better, and you won't see any mold lines later, which from my perspective is always a problem and will definitely reduce the level of realism you can create in a model. So take your time if you have it, and if you want to spend so much in a terrain piece, and really file it down, sand it down, take care that you reach all the parts. I'm not so interested in the inside of the container, so I'm not paying too much attention here, and also later gluing it together with a little overspill, because I want that I need a sturdy connection. Later you will see that I will use two different types of plastic glue. I don't use super glue. If I have the chance, I want a strong bond, and this can be achieved easily. So what I want to do is I will create some scratches, and I want to get the impression, what I show here, that a bullet struck the container on the side and then ricocheted to other parts. So like impact, a little crater, and then a scratch over the surface. You can paint a lot of scratches later, but I find it always good to also emphasize it a little bit, to give it some texture. Later also with corrosion texture, but especially for weathering initially, I will scratch with my knife, and I will try to simulate the way a strafing bullet would cause any damage. This is just for demonstration purpose. Don't put your fingers at risk. So I try to scratch the surface of the container a little bit and chip away parts of the metal. Later I will paint it in a way which will emphasize the damage. This is only to give me a little bit of structure I can use and simplify the painting process later on. You can spend as much time as you want doing this. You can add marks, scratches, holes, chipped parts in the way or the level you want for your base. For example, if you go for really necromunda hive type, you might even use more holes or more scratches. Whereas if you use a toxic environment, you can try to add some corrosive or some corroded parts from acid or something else. It totally depends, but it should immerse in the theme you have. This is what I'm always emphasizing. People asking me, how can I make my terrain more interesting? First of all, tell a little story. Add little details to your base, or especially here to your terrain piece. Don't put, for example, a neat container on a swamp base, for example. Of course you can, maybe it is freshly deployed, but then you should add, for example, some ripples or some track marks on the floor to show that. And for me, if I have a very old container, weathered, beaten by snow, cold and ice, I will add a lot of snow on top of the container. I will corrode it a little bit. I will add frozen marks. I will put the barrels I will clean later here, half buried from snow on the base. So things like that makes it much more realistic. Take care that you remove the mold lines of these little beaks here, especially inside. Can be easily overlooked, so just take care to clean them as well. So sometimes I dry fit the stuff to see if everything works, everything plays out as I want it to be. I added most of my scratches and marks to the barrels, to the front and the back door, and to the little crate. So gluing the things together, I used Tamiya cement and skull glue from Green Stuff World. Both are totally fine. Honestly, every kind of plastic glue is good. I use these two especially because the Tamiya glue is really, really good. It has a consistency which does not run into every little gap, but also not too thick to smear just over everything. So this is honestly my preferred glue. The skull glue from Green Stuff World is amazing for smaller details. It melts the plastic very well, but you can apply it in very, very thin layers, so I would recommend it for everything, for models, for smaller details here. I press it together for a while. You can use a rubber band. Don't put it too tight around the container, otherwise it might snap something open, but just take care for a few seconds that everything fits together. This also eliminates the necessity to glue to fill the gaps. So in here, especially here with the container, I hate gap filling, honestly. If you guys have a good recommendation, just let me know. Of course, you can use liquid green stuff or from Vallejo or Scale Color, their acrylic modeling paste, which is okay, but still I never get really smooth surfaces. So try to use simply the glue, press it together, especially here with the barrels, to avoid any gaps. Here, when I press the barrels together, I will use a little bit of the plastic glue to cover, well, not say cover, but to put it directly on the gap. Then I use my finger to smear it a little bit around. That works for such really used and weathered objects. I would never do this on my models because it will of course damage the surface. If you have, for example, a skin part or whatever, it will look very rough and the melted plastic is not very nice here. But here I can use it to create a smoother surface, but I will use a lot of corrosion texture later to cover it up, so I don't care so much. But please do not take this as an example how you should use glue for a general or high detailed model. So 2 barrels finished. I think that's enough for my base. I file a little bit the areas where I added the plastic glue, and I move on to back to the container, adding the little Aquila heads. I will not be too careful. One accidentally bends a little bit. You won't see this here, but a little bit later in this video. But I leave it like that. It will create an even like damaged look, which I can use later when I paint the model. As you can see, hopefully, you have these 2 little holes on top of the container, which are usually the places where you slot in the storm bolters. On purpose, I left those free because I want to get the impression that someone stole the storm bolters after deployment, and I will add a heavy amount of corrosive texture later to show this and to emphasize that little spot as part of my story. So I use the AK Interactive corrosion texture. Honestly, it gives a nice structure and texture. It dries fast, and you can smear it over. You don't have to be too careful. Before I do that, I do something with a lighter. I heat the end part of a dentist tool or a little spatula here, and I will add some scorch marks and melted plastic pieces or parts on my model. Be very careful when you use heat and lighter, especially in closed environments. Always open your windows. Don't inhale the fumes. It might be toxic, so be careful when you do something like that. I will also burn parts of the container just to create a smoother surface, and I will, on part of the front door, I will use much more heat to melt the plastic. You have to be careful if you do that. I would always recommend a heat gun, but I don't have mine at hand, so I had to use a lighter. When you use the heat gun, you have a little bit more control. So I always prefer a heat gun, but during this time, as I was recording this video, I had my heat gun not at hand, so I decided to use the lighter. And as you can see, I'm using the lighter heavily on one part of the door because I want to create the impression that someone tried to scorch or to burn this part open and then ply it a little bit to enter the container. I do not paint the inside of the container, but with such a small hole, it will have enough shadow inside that it won't look bad if you not paint the inside before. So I use a little clip, bend it open, heat the end part a little bit, although you can use a drill or something else, and I put the end on the plastic to get the impression of a las gun, marking parts of the container. I don't know if this is really realistic and if this will really stand out later in the painting process, but I thought it would be a nice addition to create this impression of an urban or at least an outside fighting zone. You have some bullets, you have some impact holes, you have some stolen equipment. That's what I'm aiming for. So if you look at pictures and examples of corrosion, you will see that the corrosion after a time really eats away the metal. I don't want to go into the chemical process here, but you have corrosion, which will remove parts of the surface, and you have chipping, chipped paint, for example, and also scratches and everything else. And that does not have to be always at the surface, the upper parts of a model, like where you have friction and impact. It can also be where water accumulates, where sandstorms or whatever damage the paint, and everything corrosive, which can be two metals together, which can be acid or so rain or whatever, or pollution, it can accumulate at the parts where water, for example, stays a while. So I will focus on equal parts of the model. That is also important. If you just spread this all over randomly, it won't look so good later. So keep in mind that you focus on certain areas. So what I do, I put this here on the position on the places where the container is flat on the ground, or not so flat as you will see later, and also on areas where water can accumulate a bit. So this will be on the top later, on the lower parts of both doors, and on the lower parts of both sides. Sorry here guys, the camera, I put the model more to the side, so I lost the focus a little bit just for a few seconds, but I will soon come back with the container. So I randomly and very sparely add a little bit of the texture on places on the side of the model as well, just to create the impression of older corrosion, which was creating some volume. So yeah, I will continue to do that. So I hope that helps you and gave you a little impression about my process for creating a piece of terrain. You will see that I will add much more now in a minute to the holes mentioned before, now where the storm bolters are located. And if you are still interested to follow this process, watch the second video where I will create the overall base, and later in part 3 where I will paint the model. Please subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this video, if you want to support me a little bit, and I hope to see you soon.